Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are diving into Swan Songs by W. Maxwell Prince and a whole host of artists. Really run the gambit in this one. And I think we'll call them out because I think we're going to take an issue by issue approach to this one. And then I think, how they play off of each other, that kind of stuff at the end. But where we want to start is I'm going to record, because Alex and I have only talked about this at kind of the 10,000 foot view level. I want to log, okay, here's Mike's ranking of issues from favorite to least favorite, which is not best to worst. I'm not making myself the arbiter of that, and there's no bad one here. I'll just get that out of the way.
Yeah, we're absolutely. I don't think there's a bad one. There's maybe it's a story maybe that is most affecting to you. Whether it's a storytelling, whether it's a presentation, there's something about it you like. Maybe you like what's presented, but the story. What do you grab onto? What claws to you the most versus the least? And when you rank something's always got to be first, something's always got to be last. So yeah, we're not passing judgment on quality here, because I do think all 6 of these issues are like truly excellent in their own way. And everyone's going to read this and they're going to connect with a different story. I'm curious if you and I have the same number one though.
All right. Do you want to kick it off or?
It was your idea. I'm gonna let you go first. Why don't you run down 1 through 6? Your favorite to least favorite.
Okay, so favorite, and this is favorite by a country mile, is issue 5.
Okay.
Second favorite is issue 1. Third is issue 3, then issue 4, then issue 6, then issue 2. And again, we'll get to it. Like, some of the art stuff in 2 is just unbelievable, and it really hurts to put that one last, but it's last because something has to be last. So what's yours look like then?
All right. So what we need to do is, in post-production, let's go back 35 seconds and say when I think we might have something similar. I want you to erase that from the record. All right.
It's a completely inverted.
Yeah. So you're not hearing this right now. This isn't happening, and we're gonna make a hard cut right now. Gee, Mike, I bet we have completely different lists.
Seamless.
Yeah, totally seamless. They'll never notice. You can do amazing things with like Pro Tools and stuff. My favorite is 6.
Okay.
I go 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
6 and 2, 5, 1, 4, 3.
And I'm looking here, and we have nothing at the same level. So this is fascinating to me.
Actually, I had 2 and 3 inverted.
Okay.
3 is the bottom of my list.
So wait, so you are 5, 1, 2?
Yeah, 5, 1, 2, 4, 6, 3.
Okay. So 3 is okay. All right. So there's one similarity there.
Yeah. Because I was looking at my notes there, and my first sentence for issue 3 is, it's cool but a bit predictable, and I kind of go into a lot of other things.
Sure.
That's the Genesis one. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's my least favorite.
Okay. All right. So I was for certain that you would have the Morazzo issue at the top.
6. Yeah.
Number 6 there, because
it felt like it's
his
supposed
off
to be your
collaboration with Ice Cream Man. Yeah. Like that would seem set up for you.
Very Ice Cream Man-y.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked that one in concept more than execution.
Okay. Okay. And that's fair. That's fair.
But, that was the one that I bought in single issue, because I remember, first of all, I have a good portion of where the sidewalk ends memorized. It was just it's a common book in my household. We have 2 copies of it now, because I have my childhood copy and someone got Anya a copy, and just starting to go through those with her now. And she's probably, amazed at my reading speed and comprehension and meter, because I have most of them memorized. So
it flows out. Yeah.
Right. It's one of those things where when you are a huge Shel Silverstein fan, and then someone does like the tribute to it, you both respect it, but you're also going to be arbitrarily more picky and critical of
So
it.
you think little hypercritical for you?
Yeah, I think
Okay. All right.
of Prince's like meter and rhyme schemes and like syllable
Oh, it,
stanzas
oh, it
didn't
wasn't.
quite match
It wasn't
like
dead
it should
on.
have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, gosh.
Well, no, it was like an ABA scheme, and then it would break with no rhyme. Or I'm like, oh, that kind of rhymes if you squint. Like if you're Eminem, that rhymes, but that's not actually a rhyme. So I felt like there were some things like that where it's like, if you're going to commit down this path, you got to really, you know,
Like Weird Al style, like the exact same type of rhyme in the same like that. That's one of the genesis of Weird Al's parody songs. Is
oh
that
yeah,
when he goes that route, it isn't just rhyming. Like he is going out of his way to match like every part of like the phonetics of it. You know?
yeah, he like inhabits the person's body for a day.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well,
Either way, but I will
I,
say, like Shel Silverstein is Shel Silverstein for a reason. No one
true.
can do exactly Shel Silverstein.
Yeah.
And this was pretty damn great.
All right.
As
Well,
far as the
I
tribute
I would
goes.
have lost a lot of money as the part of the recording that you all definitely did not hear has been cut. If I had bet on that,
You got the
but,
bottom one.
Yeah. There's agreement there, and when we talk about that issue, which is the Filipe Andrade issue, I wonder if we have a similar reasoning why. Is to come in why that didn't work as well for us. But I can say I can totally see why five. I thought you would go 6-5, and because five is just an extraordinary issue, and we'll get to it a little more when we get down there. What I'll say, my reasoning as to where I put it is for me is that presentation wise, it's incredible, but that was a story that I didn't quite connect with in terms of the story part. The storytelling visual was unbelievable, but for me, that's kind of why I put that down at 3. For me, it's not quite as high.
Oh, and that's why I said by a country mile, because I'm just like,
Okay, yeah.
I had basically an art ranking and a story ranking, and it was
Okay,
top
yeah,
for both.
top both. Sure. All right. Well, how about we go back through? Let's go back to the beginning here and start at issue 1, which is the Martin Simmonds issue, the end of the world. As we go through each one, we'll read off the what the story is about, what the prompt, I guess, was here, and so this is a story framed around a guy in a hospital sitting with his dying mother. He's reading her home and garden magazines as the nuclear clock strikes down. The literal clock strikes down, and when it hits 0, nuclear annihilation. And it's like the premise of this one here, the thesis here is kind of, the way that I read it was, and I believe it to be, is, the end is inevitable, death is inevitable. So what do you do? How do you keep going? Is you focus on the small things. You focus on the little things, the tiny baby steps that you take every single day, the things you do, and that's illustrated here by him leaving the hospital, venturing out into the crazy world just to get some more magazines and to come back. And we see what he does. He does some terrible things, and terrible things happen to him just to get some magazines so he can read them to his mother as she is dying, as the world is about to die.
Yeah. First of all, incredible homage and tribute to the comic collectors of the world. When you're one issue shy of a complete collection, even with the doomsday clock ticking down and like sure nothingness ahead of you, it's like, gotta complete
It might
the
be
collection.
out there.
Yeah, it might be out there. It might be out there.
Might be one more.
And that idea that well, other people have raided the store, but they're not after what I'm after. Yeah. I was that's such a real feeling.
Yeah, that was great. That conference when he's like, I need something from you, and he's like, I got nothing. He lists all the medicine, medication, all that, blah blah blah, and he's like, magazines. And he's kind of like, oh, I got that,
Right. Yeah. It's that feeling when you're like just going through your comic app in a comic shop, like a shop that you haven't really been to before, and you're going through back issues, and they're like, "Can I help you find anything?" You're like, I'm just looking for like spot issues. Like I need a new 52 issue of Flash number 32 or something. And they're like, I'm probably not going to have much of that. And you're like, nope, it's right here, cover
Right. Yeah.
price.
Yeah.
It's still $2.99 because literally no one, this would have sat here another 10 years had I not come in today. Because
Yeah.
why would someone be looking for this spot issue when it's already collected in trade and yada, yada, yada. So
Yeah.
anyway, I got a very like happy, like, let's go, type moment when that happened.
So you have this at 2. I have this at 4. So what did you connect with on this one? In terms of you said you ranked them like that kind of like presentation and story connection. So what was it about this one that spoke to you?
Yeah, so the art in this one, like the
So
very distressed. So I'll say I'm a little bit of a sucker for like the highly distressed look, but in a full series, it wears on me.
Okay.
So like Department of Truth,
I was going to say that.
yeah, it wears me down a little bit, and sometimes. And I'm not saying this about the Department of Truth, but sometimes I see this in like indie self-published comics where people take this really distressed aesthetic and it kind of masks lazy line work underneath. And this is gorgeously drawn. Like you could take away the coloring and the styling on top of it, and it's still, it's got very interesting paneling. It's got good character design. It does good like close-up work on faces, all this other stuff. So I'm like, yeah, artistically, it's pretty creative. And then story-wise, it just feels like it's a slice of life story that just happens to be at the end of the world. And I love the juxtaposition of that. I love that he's not running across town to get a cure that will save all of humanity. Yeah. I feel like the lesser writer feels the need in this moment, to make the stakes greater. And yet for this character, there are no greater stakes than getting this magazine. And I think that's a story very, very well told in like 24 pages.
Yeah.
It's like at 24 pages, you're rooting for this guy. It's maybe a bit on the nose, the emotional vampire thing.
But they call it out though.
I know.
Then he says, that you watch out for emotional vampires, as therapist said, and then the end of the world happened, and that got a little more confusing because there were literal emotional vampires.
Yeah, and reflecting on his therapist's old thoughts in light of the new world, I thought there was a little juxtaposition from people now. Like we're entering 2025, we're about to enter a new 4-year tenure of American politics, and I think some people feel like the world is burning to the ground, and it's like you just keep turning over the things that your therapist tells you while you see the world burning around you. And it's like this feels like an insufficient coping mechanism because it's not a problem just in my head. It's actually a problem everywhere.
It's this is fine dog, right?
It's exactly what it is. Yeah. And so like the guy clinging to the only tool he has, which is like, listen to the words of my therapist, take care of my mom. These are the only things I've got to hold on to in this world.
So I think the therapy thing, I think, is where I bump on this and why it's a little lower for me, because I feel like in a lot of these stories and kind of the presentation here, there is I almost said like an Aesop's fable, like a moral at the end. There's a lesson learned here. Our character here, Brian, he doesn't learn any lessons. He knows the lessons. And so I as I read it and as I've reread it, I think about, there's like the idea of him voluntarily leaving the hospital, venturing out into the world, like killing a homeless dude with a hammer, attacking people with a hammer, getting stabbed, and then coming back dressed for magazines. Part of me wonders if, like, would I have liked it more if his mom asked him to go to his office to get more magazines, and he's like, "Mom, the world's about to end." He's like, "Can you please go and do this for me?" And he does it reluctantly. He goes out there. Same things happen. Go to the subway, attacks the guy. The little kid stabs him, steals his money. He ends up in his therapist's office anyway. And then he gets the lesson about the baby steps and the chairs and the little things. And he gets that lesson then and there as he hands the magazines. So when he makes his way back, he sits down. Now he's there because he has a greater understanding of why this is important to do, why it's important to be there and do this before his mother as she's dying, as the world is ending. I almost feel like this is one where I was looking for a lesson. So it was like I was looking for something that wasn't there, and clearly that wasn't the intent. But I think for me,
that's an interesting one because I was not looking at it as the character's journey. I was looking at it as, what did he give her? Like the physical object was the magazine. What he gave her was like hope. What he gave her was like just a small moment of like, I didn't believe you, and you were right. And she gets just this little moment of ecstasy before she dies. Yeah. Like he's gifting her a moment of happiness in the face of the abyss.
And the way that I read it was what she would have been gifting him is the revelation that this is important. That reading to her was great, but he was doing it because he was asking her to do it, and she's his mother, she's dying, she's going to do it, but he's doing it with the idea of like, the world is literally on fire. Why am I doing this? And then when he comes back after that, at the end of the issue, he now understands why it's important, that he understands why it's important to her, and he has the epiphany. So again, that was clearly not the intent, because the idea, the message of like focusing on the little things and the baby steps, that's like on the opening page of the issue. But I think that's, for me, when I read this, it's me projecting the story I want versus the one that I'm getting. And I understand that's a me thing, but I have a hard time getting over that one on this case, which I think is why I have it a little lower. And actually, I think that happens for the three that I have, the comics I have ranked at the back half of the list. I think that's that thing I can't get over in terms of like, I wanted something different out of the story, which is a wildly unfair thing to do when consuming a story. But I have a hard time getting over that mindset for some of these issues. And I think it starts for me with this first one, because unlike you, in this manner, like I love Department of Truth and this uneasy style, this distress style that Martin Simmonds has, where there you have these, just this frenetic style, and you'll get these crazy paneling angles. It's like incredibly sharp color contrasts, and at times nothing looks in focus. A big thing for him is eyes, where you don't see eyes,
right,
on characters, and then when you do, it's clearly supposed to be important. But that idea of putting the reader on edge and just setting the vibe for what the story is, I think that's a really, really cool thing, and it's something that I think very few artists can do. This has a very 1980s Bill Sienkiewicz vibe for those that read like New Mutants and stuff back in the day, where it was this like almost avant-garde style that was like, if you were a kid in the 80s reading it, like you just didn't get, it was scary at the time. You didn't understand what he was doing. But now looking back on it, you're like, this is actually, like, I understand it now. It's kind of incredible. And I think Simmonds does that. So I love seeing the artwork. And I said, I love seeing it in Department of Truth. It's so perfect for that. And I think it really, really works here for the story that they're trying to tell.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, and like I said, it's a perfect dose of it for me in an anthology, because I get to appreciate, the beauty of it without feeling like, I'm thinking of the most recent example for me, the one where it crossed the line into, so like right up against the line in terms of being possibly too distressed was like a book like Shanghai Red, where like I picked it up because the art was so cool. 5 issues in, I'm like, I just wish things were a little clearer. And then the book last year, oh my gosh, Sean Lewis, the Bear Pirate Viking Queen.
Oh, right. Yes. Very much. Oh, yeah.
So distressed that I was having trouble following the story. And the storytelling itself wasn't really helping either. It's just, it was a nit to pick, and you know, I still absolutely adored this story.
Mhm.
I'm just not sure how much more of that I could have taken. So,
Understood. Yeah.
we can always circle back to issue one, but
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
six
As we
issues,
work our way through. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we should probably
We'll
keep
say
moving.
the last that last full page spread though of the mushroom cloud that goes into the colors of the flowers and all that. I mean, the something like that, the way that Simmonds draws, where it's this like there's a natural surreality to the way he draws, just like regular stuff. So when you get an image like that, that is terrifying and beautiful as well, I think it's absolutely gorgeous image. So
Yeah, it's very, very, very nice.
so yeah,
Issue two.
two now. Issue two, drawn by Casper Wijngarrd, The End of a Marriage. It's a story of a couple of an ex-couple, ex-spouses who, at the end of their divorce proceedings, per the terms of their divorce, they are to compete in various styles of Mortal Kombat for all eternity. And this story is told as they are each remembering how the relationship began, flourished, and ended. And you get the opposing viewpoints from either side, from both the husband and the wife. I had this number 2, you had this number 3, so we both of us had it very, very high. So tell me first off, what about this one grabbed you? Why did it kind of land where it landed for you?
So I think art would have it be number 2. Story
Yes.
would probably have it be number 5.
Okay.
So for me, the artistic choices in here, which I credit the writer with as well. The very concept of this was well written, and then the coloring in particular. So, when they're doing the plain, literally doing a legal deposition, like sitting around a table, you get the subjective eye view in pink or blue based on whose perspective in the marriage you're getting. And the flashback stories very similarly, you get the pink and blue caption boxes for just really good storytelling.
Yeah.
Like the story they're telling, I don't really care about. I don't think it's that interesting, but the method of storytelling is so good.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you think, oh, this is kind of sparse, minimal artwork. I dig it. And you flip the page and it's like Knights on a Horse. And it's like so lush, so detailed, so jarringly different color schemes while still juggling that pink and blue. And then as you proceed from there, it cuts back to their regular art style. Yeah. Then you get the samurai fight, and then you go back to the, on a MacBook or whatever the fake Mac icon is there.
Yeah, the definitely not a MacBook logo there. Yeah.
Right. And then you get the Jack Kirby world.
The Kirby-esque liminal engagement, which was so good.
I mean,
well, and
if you were given the task of like, hey, I know monthly I know monthly storytelling can be really demanding on artists, so I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm just going to give you one issue of an anthology.
Yeah.
And you get this assignment. You deserve an Eisner nomination for the one, because you had to do so many things, including an authentic Kirby.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I love so much about that, you talk about the coloring, like it changes for each of those combat sequences, depending on the style. That Kirby book is a little bit washed out. It looks almost, it's not dot printed, but it's given a texture where it looks like it's printed on. And even the back page, it's not white. It's a little bit, it's a little darker, like it looks like it's on newsprint. That little extra effort for 2 pages. 2 pages they do that, and then you cut back to the
you cut back to the modern world, and the color hits you because it's like this Matt Wilson, Cliff Chang level pink.
It's Casper Wijngarrd. I love his art. You can see some Cliff Chang it's in the way he draws faces. You can see some Cliff Chang in his line work, and the way this book specifically is colored has a very, obviously it's that pastel blue, pastel pink. But what I was going to say is you go back to the samurai sequence,
Yeah.
that's drawn in an intentional kind of action manga way, you know. Um, the our Knights Joust, again, different style, different coloring, all of that. It really just seems like they let Casper Wijngarrd just flex,
Yeah.
like you're going to draw
Uh,
your regular style, which is again a style I absolutely love, which is the reason. And the art here is what puts this number two for me, which is why above story, because I'm with you. This story is very much just like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about that this is a story about what love is. And the kind of the end thesis, is like love is all these things. It can be all these things. It can be pain and hurt and sorrow, but it can also be wonder and light and joy and all these things. And ultimately, I think it ends with, love is death. I guess the idea that it's eternal, regardless of kind of what form it takes, which is that's a pretty down the middle one in terms of like,
yeah, no, they literally did till
messages.
death
Yeah.
do us part.
Exactly. So yeah, story wise, I don't think that one hits as well for me, but because I'm such a fan of Casper Wijngarrd's art, and again, if you like this, go pick up the Power Fantasy, this current book with Kieran Gillen. You'll see a lot of the same sort of thing, which is the kind of the mundane, everyday Earth stuff mixed with super-powered beings. Just think of these battle sequences as the super-powered moments. So you kind of get that all in one book. But again, I'm with you. The art is so phenomenal in this one, which is why I have it so high in my ranking.
Now, do you have this one signed by Casper already, or have you not had a chance to?
I do not. I have
guess
not,
since
no.
this came out, it wasn't
Yeah.
that long ago.
Yeah, wasn't that long ago. No, but I do not have this signed by Casper Wijngarrd. This
But
and like
that's
Power
one to
Fantasy
get,
one.
right? Like
Yes,
this.
this issue. I have issue one signed by Martin Simmonds. Never met W. Maxwell Prince at a show. I would love to it someday, but I have met Martin Simmonds and other things I have signed by hand. I have Swan Songs #1. So
Yeah. But yeah, just great art. It deserves, every accolade you can give it.
yeah.
And
But
I
in
think
terms of
the story's meh. And I think
that's what I was going to say. So in terms of the
they
theme,
think they're telling the story of their marriage ending being like the legal ending of it, but they actually end up telling the story of the moment it ended. Like when they took
Yes.
their attention off of each other,
Yes.
that was actually the moment the marriage ended.
Yes.
Now they're
yes, yeah.
codifying the end of the marriage.
Yeah. They're literalizing the end, but it was already over. So that's where I was leading, or I was curious about. It's like in terms of the theme of this book, stories about endings. Just from a story standpoint, I think we both agree this, I think, is on the kind of the weaker end, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I say strictly on story presentation, like what they're trying to say, the thing that they're trying to say is ending and how they're presenting that.
yeah. But it really depends, what hits you. I think if one of us had just gone through divorce in the last 2 years,
Fair.
this might be our favorite issue of all time.
Yeah, fair.
Not just in the series, but like a favorite single issue that's like, yeah, you get it. Like this,
Yeah.
how much it hurts. This is what it's like. It's the battle. It's mileage may vary based on life experience.
And that is fair. We're obviously not saying these are definitive rankings. Like we're 100% right.
No.
This is what-
I think that's why I went so far out of my way to say,
Yeah.
preference. Like,
Yeah.
This is my preference. I would, trying to create an objective ranking of people's work is completely idiotic unless it's
yes.
ranking the Godfather trilogy or something. Yeah. And it's like, well, there's a clear worst, in some cases. So issue 3, since we're on the topic of, we're not saying it's bad, just saying didn't work for me.
Sure.
I think issue 3 was the one where we're both united, where that's at the bottom.
Yeah, that is Filipe Andrade, the end of the world. Now, we will be talking more about Filipe Andrade and his work starting next week with the Manny Desalela Star, his book with Ram V, which I think is a much more effective storytelling endeavor than this specific issue is. However, I do think there are a lot of things you can see in this book in this issue that you will see translated over from an art style in terms of what to expect. If you've never seen Andrade's work before, I think you kind of get everything here. Excuse me. Although I think the big difference that I think actually I'm more interested to track now when I go back and read Layla Starr is Layla Starr. He's working with a colorer. Inez Amora, I believe is now, or Amoro, I believe the name is. Here he's coloring himself, and there's something about the way he colors himself, and you see it in his other book with Ram V, Rare Flavors, where it looks like color pencil to me. Am I crazy?
No.
Yeah.
I was thinking, wow, yeah.
Because I know
But
you
like
can buy,
nice colored pencils, right?
oh, no,
I mean,
no,
like,
oh yeah. But
like,
what I'm saying is that
but it
it's
looks
almost
like
like I'm
there's some
not
watercolor on
maybe
the
background.
background.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is I'm not seeing like a line
Pencil and
work
ink. Yeah.
and then a blue line. It's like he's doing it with pencil from maybe a blue line to start with, and then going from there and coloring and drawing as he goes. It's like you don't see the lines there, and I'm curious if he does that when he colors his own stuff, because you can buy original art from Layla Starr, like his original line and ink
Right.
art pre-colored. So I know he works that way, but there he was working with a separate colorist. With this book, though, from a strictly art standpoint, it looks like to me like he was drawing it all at the same time, drawing, coloring with colored pencils, maybe with a rough layout, maybe with like a blue line layout, but like it wasn't like there, like I don't see inks. I don't see, it's like he's doing it all with the color. And I think that's fascinating. And I thought a similar thing when I read Rare Flavors, again, because that's another book he drew and colored himself. So from an art standpoint, I love Andrade's art. But I think for me, and maybe for you, this story didn't hit for me like at all, which is why I dropped it to the bottom of my least favorite. I can stare at Andrade's work all day, and when I flip through it, I love it. I love the way he blends colors, these kind of high contrast, warm and cool colors. But the story just it wasn't there for me. What about you?
Yes. So I mean, I will say, I feel like I I knew I felt like I had a good sense of what he wanted to do with this story,
Okay.
and I respect the effort at it. I was hoping that he would have a surprise for us instead, because I mean that's what I expect from him when I read
Yeah.
Ice Cream Man. There's usually some little at the
A
end.
twist. Yeah.
And I think he thought he had a twist, but it's the most predictable thing in the world. So I think it's kind of a cool concept to say, like, yeah, we could do this a million times and we're gonna do it the same way over and over again.
Yeah.
Because you would think the people who went into a bunker to avoid the violence would at least make it one generation before
Yeah.
committing violent acts of atrocities again. But they don't, and the reason is because of their zombie pulp fiction
Survival guide.
books
Yeah.
become like sacred text for them in a matter of months. I'm like, yeah, it's just like, it's a lot to buy into for not that much payoff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the I'm with you. Obviously, the play on the theme here is that every ending is the beginning of the next story, but that next story was the same story
The
you just finished.
Semisonic already said that.
Yeah, well, but
So, right.
it's the idea that it ends the story you just finished, but it begins the next one. But the next story is actually the same story. That it's just a cycle. So it's a
I
kind
think
of an
what you're
idea
saying is
of,
every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end,
well, yeah, no,
which is
no,
the
every
closing
beginning.
time.
No,
Yeah.
but yes, but it's the idea that every beginning is the same beginning, because we're caught in a loop here. So it's a death, life, rebirth kind of thing, reincarnation. That maybe it's just maybe it's just different and not new, that sort of thing. So the idea that the cycle of life and death, which is a curious thing when we end up talking about next week with Layla Starr. and specifically with Andrade's work there. But yeah, I'm with you. The idea of what they're trying to say here, again, that we're caught in a loop, that just because it ends and it's the end of the world, doesn't mean it's necessarily the beginning of a new one. In this case, it's the beginning of, well, what they're saying is it's the beginning of the same one, because we're starting the same way. And that, I guess, we're forever doomed or destined, whatever, fated, whatever it is, to be caught in this cycle, that the end of the world doesn't really matter because it's just going to start up the same way again. I'm with you. There's that story, that play on the theme doesn't have the heft that I think you're right that they think it might have.
Right. I'm like, I can imagine a version that's just like 2 ticks in a different direction.
Yeah.
That lands the way they intended this to.
Where they don't kill the scientists?
Where they don't kill the scientists, or, even if the scientists had a reason to try to kill them, and, only their kid survives without the knowledge, and the kid has to try to guess, the how to navigate the world in light of no history of the nuclear fallout. No parents to raise him.
What
would he learn about the world from this clean slate world?
The kid's already born and the parents die, and then he becomes Batman.
He becomes Batman, or the parents and the scientists die. The kid's like one, and
he's already Superman because it's an irradiated world. Who knows? It's
exactly.
One of those two. Yeah, it's the origin of either one. Yeah,
right. It could have been could have been one more Batman title on the shelf, and Lord knows we need it. They
both die, and they're raised by one of the surviving scientists, and he becomes Spider-Man. It's one. It could be that one too. Who knows?
Yeah.
My gosh. But I think I'm with you. Had there been some sort of twist, and had it not been the idea of we're caught in a cycle. But again, I think this goes back to what I was saying with issue 1. I'm disappointed in the story that I got because I thought it should have been something else, as opposed to reading the story. Like I can't get over they're telling the story of life, death, rebirth of a cycle, when I'm reading this story thinking like, it'd be cool if it was not about that, when clearly that was the intent, which is, and again, something that putting that reader intention or desire is not always the greatest way to consume stories. But you and I ended up on the same page on this one. Like we were feeling the same.
Bring that desire in is usually a guaranteed formula for disappointment and toxic fandom.
Yeah. Because like you did this and I wanted it to be, you did X, I wanted Y, thus you're wrong. Well, it's their story. You don't have to like the story, but the story can't be wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So
unless it's a certain Star Wars movie, but
yeah. Well, no, it's not wrong. It can just be bad, and that's fine. And you have to live with the story, with the universe you like, the world you like, having bad stories in it. Suck it up. It's too bad. But this one, again, I don't think this is bad at all. I don't think Andrade, his work, and him and Prince together there, just they're not going to make something like that. And again, going back to the art here, I think my favorite bit is when we jump to chapter 2, and it's all the scientists, right? And it's that cool blue tone, and it's all blue. And when they come outside and you look over towards the tree and you get that one little warm red of their little new Garden of Eden. And again, that mixture of the coldness of the blue and the warmth of the red and yellow and all that stuff. And as they merge together, and that contrast is something that Andrade does so well with his work. And I love that kind of Prince gave him a chance to work with that and play in that space and flex those muscles and show that work. I just wish it was a little bit tighter story.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yep.
Issue 4, which I think we both had in the middle of the pack.
You had it at 4. I had it at 5, so I had a little lower there. Chapter 4, The End of a Sentence. This is Caitlin Yarsky's book. A man is released from prison with a sad libs book, which is subtitled Very Specific Fill-in Sentences. And as we see it goes along, the sad libs he's filling out are the moments of his life that he's experiencing right then and there.
He's actually not very good at Mad Libs because he's very literal with it. It's like if you gave Drax the Destroyer a Mad Libs book.
Well, but I think that's the point here. When we see him in jail, he's doing the thing you do, right? He's throwing at, hey, give me a verb, give me a pronoun, give me a proper noun, things like that. But when he has the sad libs on his own, he is filling them in literally up until the end, when there's this aborted bank heist and his brother's telling him to hit the guard with the car, and he looks down and he sees that the entry is blank. And there, I believe the message here is that, your future is undecided. Is the idea that it's not, you don't fill in your future, you experience your future. Life is something that happens to you, not something that you're writing and know about. And so the idea of, I guess it's almost like, life is a comma, not a sentence, up until you die, up until the end. So
I
as long
agree
as
with everything you're saying, and I had a different take on.
Okay, all right,
on the final page.
Shoot.
No, but like.
No, go. Yeah.
I think is that and like that just hadn't occurred to me. I thought this was literally meant for the reader to fill this in and guess the direction you think the story's going, because I think it tells you something about you.
Interactive. Oh, like that.
You learn your own.
Wow.
You learn your own bias toward free will or not. And the way I read the story was he's absolutely going to slam his foot on the gas and run that guy over. Because everything I've read so far has made me think this guy can't change, not because he doesn't have free will, but because he doesn't think he can change.
I guess that really does play, because you're right. The free will idea is flowing through the whole thing. He doesn't believe in it.
Well, if I ever get this issue signed, I'm making him fill out the last page. Maxwell Prince, that is.
What you need is you need two. You need to give one to Maxwell Prince. You need to give one to Caitlin Yarsky.
Have them fill out every other. Yeah, make them rotate.
I was going to say have them fill them out separately, and then you have both there. You have both creative partners on this issue here. I love that idea of putting it in the hands of the reader, of us. That didn't even cross my mind.
I felt like if Brian K. Vaughan had written this, he would have been like, fill this out and mail it in. I'll publish the best ones.
Oh, yeah, of course he would. Like tear it out of the comic.
Right. I'm like, I love an interactive thing like that. Yeah. It gave me a callback to my favorite issue of The Unwritten, the Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yes.
The Lizzie Hexam origin story. Mm-hmm. And there is another one where you're supposed to fill in the blank. Kurt's plan is very blank adjective. A few pages back, and that was where I first had the idea of like, oh, well, if I ever meet W. Maxwell Prince, I'm going to have him sign the front of the book and fill in that adjective. But then I got to the last page, and I was like, no, I'm going to make him fill in the whole thing.
I that actually, I know you only have it one spot higher than I do, but I feel like that really does change the way I think about it, because the way I looked at it was it's blank intentionally because. It wasn't supposed to.
But don't you think both of our theories can be true at the same time?
They are. They're on parallel tracks. I didn't think about. I guess the part I didn't think was the one step beyond of forcing the reader to think about free will versus determination. I saw the blanks as being, no, this is the character having to let go and understand that you do have choice. That you can't fill in the blanks and say this is how it's going to go because this is the way it's supposed to go, because nothing is written. That the end of the sentence is not, and of course we should mention here, sentence here obviously is a, play on words here. End of a sentence as the end of a jail sentence for him, and the actual writing here. But yeah, I didn't take it that one step further of self-reflection for the reader. I like that idea. That almost makes me want to flip it above flip
But see,
one
this is
and
why I
four.
wanted to bookend.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
expected our rankings to change.
yeah.
And now that I'm seeing it on multiple levels, I think it probably moves up one spot for me.
So okay, okay.
So now it's
Let's
third.
yeah, we'll put a pin. It may be
And I
third for
think
you.
it might be
It may be
second. I mean,
okay.
like,
All right.
I think so. Here's what I want to say about the art in this one. I don't think, I think this is a weird thing to say. It's the cleanest, most detailed, best pencil work
Yes.
in the entire anthology,
Yeah.
and it's the least interesting art in the entire anthology.
It
And
is.
it's like it's not a dig on this. It's just in the context, surrounded by all of these other crazy books.
Yeah.
It's so ordinary. It's so
Yarsky's art
comics from the 2000s.
that is Yarsky's art. There's kind of a heavy ink to it. Like you can see people in the foreground. I think there's a lot of, from a facial standpoint, I think there's some Fiona Staples in her work. In
Oh,
terms of the way,
like each
in the way
page
she,
clearly takes a long time.
yeah.
Yeah,
You're right. I'm a fan of her art. It is the least experimental in terms of
that's the word.
It's
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it does stand out in that way. Again, I don't think that's a knock
And this right, and this story shouldn't have had experimental art.
because it wasn't about that.
Right.
There
So
almost
it's not
is
knocking
an
her
ordinary,
choice. It's
yeah,
literally saying this is an ordinary run-of-the-mill story, especially by the standards of this book.
but we get crazy things like the jockey riding a tiger. You know, you get
Right.
this kind of random moment here that has a intentional and specific juxtaposition. You know, like here's this fantastical element he's imagining as he looks out the car. You
Yeah.
know, but the rest of the story is all very mundane. Even when they rob a bank dressed up as colonial area presidents, you know, colonial Point Break, kind of genius,
Yeah. Her line work reminds me of, I mean, a lot of like Vertigo people from the 2000s. I was thinking in particular of, oh boy, what is his name? He did the later pencils in the Unwritten. He did the book Air with G. Willow Wilson.
Oh, MK Perker.
MK Perker, yeah.
Yeah.
And it felt like kind of a warm, comfortable blanket. It felt very MK Perker era Vertigo type art. You know, it's clean, it's detailed, it's nice.
If you want to see,
Good shading.
I say if you like it, but you're like, I wonder what Caitlin Yarsky could do outside of the quote unquote real world. You know,
Right.
If you want to see what she can do with a story set in our world but with supernatural elements, the book that she writes and draws herself over at Dark Horse called Living Hell is a book about demons and monsters that are in our world, and so she gets to use some different abilities and different styles and all that. So if you like this and you're like, well, what if she got one of the weirder, crazier, nuttier stories? What could she do with that? Pick up Living Hell and start reading that, and you can see, you can see how her style translates to that, and it works really well. But you're right, she's not asked to do that in this story. You know, she wasn't asked to be have any sort of fantastical elements. It's a bank robbery, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So
And you get the fun of them wearing the masks.
Yes,
So you have to
yeah.
do your original character design with a cheesy mask on.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
it's, she absolutely made the most of the assignment without trying to steal the show by being like abstract for the sake of it,
Yeah,
which I
yeah.
think,
What I will say though, the
would have
one
been
thing
a
I really did
mistake.
like that I had a note here about the art was that when we get into the bank heist and the bank heist starts going wrong, I like that all of a sudden the panel starts getting weird, you know, crazy
Yes.
shapes, crazy angles. Again, that idea of the frenetic, oh my God, what's happening as the gunfire is happening. And then after the gunfire is happening and they're being held at gunpoint, panels go back to being steady again. but for those like couple pages when shots are being fired and guys are getting hit and all that, it gets crazy there for a second. So she's allowed to do a little bit with the storytelling there. And then, again, we end the pages with the sad libs on the bottom half. I mean, I think those are my favorite because the sad libs are funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what else is funny about this? And I think this is great. This is a great example of what Maxwell Prince can do when he's in the right mood. Is the Point Break references.
Yeah.
Like even when they have a gun in their face, they're like, "Is this a Point Break thing?"
Yeah. Well, the fact that like everyone brings it up,
right?
Like so
it's so unoriginal.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like these characters are so stupid.
Yeah. Oh, they're the dumbest bankrupt. I mean, obviously.
Like the whole group of them. It also had very strong first Ant-Man movie vibes of like his buddy picks him up. Yeah. They bring him to the apartment and immediately are like, "Here's the job."
A job for you.
Yeah. It's just like, yeah. If he had gotten a job at Baskin Robbins first, if they had one more page to squeeze that in, and if they could say Baskin Robbins always finds out and he's back home again, it would have been my favorite Easter egg of all time.
Yeah. I will say though, reading the ending again here and really paying attention to it, now that you said it, it does really say free will is your thoughts on free will. So
right.
the your bit, I will say, your good luck, your name. So yeah, maybe you are right. Maybe it is meant to be read that way, as opposed to, again, the way they're reading it. It was just the characters reading it, characters in the book reading your name, your thoughts.
Right. I thought what made it feel
that I'm the reader.
Wally is exactly, that his name is written as the first word in the sad lib there.
Oh,
they call him Bobby there. So now it's talking about him to us.
Oh,
and it's our Mad
that's a
Lib.
great pickup. I glossed right over that.
That being said, I don't think anyone calls him Bobby. Like he gets out of jail, he's Robert. Maybe and everyone calls him dumbass.
Yeah,
so I don't know what his actual nickname is.
So, but I think that is a great pickup now that he is not reading this anymore. So maybe you are. Maybe it is supposed to be that meta level. And if it is, I think it definitely jumps up the spot to number 4 for me. I think I switch it with 1. I like that idea of now we're putting that examination onto the reader now.
His girlfriend calls him Bobby.
Okay. All right. There we go. All right.
So yeah. So that's officially, that is his name. And I think, there's no way he has a sad libs, that is specifically tailored to him, that the guy got in the grocery store checkout aisle.
Well, but you look at the rest of them, like they are, so we flip back and I'm sitting in a diner with my ex-girlfriend. She's got a baby that belongs to not me. So it's all I, but he's writing the exact specific thing that's happening. And you're right. So the fact that it switches to Bobby at the end, it is meant for us, the reader, to be thinking about that and examining our thoughts on free will, and not just be a meditation on free will. It's meant for us to think about that.
And I got to say, there's what's amazing about this collection is, I would say, everything except issue 3. As I was reading it, I thought of someone I knew who doesn't read comics who would like this particular issue.
That issue, yeah.
And I know plenty of people who would like number 3, but I was like, oh, who would really love to, like, somebody would think this is really clever, they're really funny. And then I got to issue 5 and I was like, oh, I definitely know somebody who has never read a comic before, but he's an artist. Yeah. And he would love this because he's probably never seen this type of art used for sequential storytelling.
Pretty much no one has. So we should probably get to number 5, because number 5,
it's like I can only hold it in so much longer.
Yeah. So chapter 5, Alex Eckman-Lawn, the end of Anhedonia. Real quick, did you know what that was when you first read the book? Maybe you did. I'm an engineer. I don't know words, so I had to look it up.
Anhedonia. Well,
Anhedonia, yeah.
I assume that has to do with hedonism, and the an would be a negation.
Yes.
I'm looking at the Greek. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So I know ancient Greek.
Okay, so
So
it is the inability to experience pleasure from things and activities that are generally considered to be enjoyable or pleasurable. So, and
hey,
of
look
course,
at that. Sometimes
and
sometimes you can do that like etymological breakdown of a word,
yeah, yeah,
and it's just dead wrong.
yeah, yep, 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 yep.
But I
But
think
of course,
I just missed that word altogether because I was eager to dive into the issue.
oh
Because when
yeah,
I
but
got to it in the trade, I was like, oh, I know this is. I
this
think
is,
I
yeah,
remember it from the Art Zero
the
episode,
Eckman-Lawn, yeah, yeah, yeah.
like what the art was
But
going to be,
you,
especially from the cover.
you don't get it, explained now, but he does explain, our character here explains that yeah, he doesn't find joy in things. You know, they talk about roller coasters, used to like them, don't anymore. You know, amusement parks, kids' birthday parties, nothing there. So the idea that this guy can't find joy, and so it's what's the end of this uh not the end of this condition for him, you know?
Right.
So basically, how does he find joy again? And in this case, it's he goes into like a trance therapy and he reconnects with his literal inner child. And he learns to accept viewing the world from a childlike stance. They talk about the beginner's mind versus the expert mind, right? The beginner's mind has many possibilities, while the expert mind has few. So it's kind of the idea of like the more stuff you know, the more cluttered it gets, the less options you have.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Which so I loved all of that. I will say, yeah, I think we're both like 5 out of 5 no notes on the art on this one. Right. I mean, it's just
yeah.
like you could just go back and look at this one every single day and never get tired of it.
This is literally unique, like actually unique.
Right.
There is nothing else like this, especially in terms of interior sequential art. And I am dying to know. I have to assume some of the distant backgrounds because I said so. We talked about Eckman-Lawn's art a little bit briefly in last week in the Zero episode. He's a paper collage artist, physical paper collage artist, meaning, and I believe this, when you see the shadows of the characters, like that's an actual shadow because that piece is up above and he's using a light source down on it to cast a shadow. So
Yeah.
he's not
I
drawing
mean, I
it
found
in.
myself wondering about the scale of some of these.
And some of them are probably huge. And there is
Right.
some.
I was like, some of these could be poster size, some of these could be a whole wall.
Yeah. He uses some digital manipulation, obviously. So the very first time we jump into his mind, he's walking down the big staircase, right? And it's obviously this big staircase that he's coming down. And our character is in 3 different spots, and it's broken up 3 panels, top, middle, bottom. Which I'm assuming it's all photographed there, right? And then you put the panels in digitally. And I got to imagine the stuff in the background, the roller coaster and stuff like that. That's probably digital art, you know. So that's probably not part of the collage. I'm assuming. I don't know. Maybe he draws that background and
I was
the
going to
whole
say, I
thing
could
is
see
there.
him drawing the background and dropping it in.
It
But
could have
even
been.
if you drew it physically and dropped it in digitally,
And then just
I'm
erase
awarding
the
full points. Yeah.
yeah, and then it just you erase the parts to make the panels. I got no idea. I mean, just dying to know, no pun intended, exactly what was physical, what was digital, and again, just to see as much of the physical with the scale. Yeah, you're right. Because I want to know how big some of these are. I mentioned last week Dave McKean. He was he's the cover artist for Sandman. In terms of, he created these incredible like physical collages, like out of wood and paper and ceramic and all this stuff, and those are what photographed and became the covers. And then when you see how big they actually are, it's like a holy crap moment. You know, like this thing is massive. He did all of that for a cover. You know,
Right.
And so now Eckman-Lawn is doing this incredible paper collage work to tell sequential art. You know, which is just it's mind blowing to go through and just realize that like he has made and layered and put all this together. It's so fascinating because you just again never see anything like this. Never see anything like this.
Yeah. I mean, and you have read tens of thousands of comics.
Yeah, in the tens, so not
Right.
tens of, but I'm in the tens,
Right.
probably.
I was like, I've probably read thousands at this point easily. I mean, on this podcast alone, probably approached 1,000.
Yeah.
We should do a count, by the way, at some point, just to see
what,
how many
total
issues.
single issues.
Yeah, we've covered. So about the story of this.
Yeah.
One, it resonated with me. I liked it a lot. And what I kept thinking was there was a book from AWA a few years ago that I sort of liked. I would say I kind of liked it, and you sort of didn't, which was New Think.
Oh, yes. I remember an anthology book.
Yeah. And I kept thinking, this is what New Think was trying to be. Like, to like say, you know, how does someone get changed out of like a fatalistic grid of thinking, which is a thing that happens to me a lot. Like I become very cynical, and your mind just keeps going through the same rut again and again and again. Because, you know, it's like, oh, I'm so smart. I can see all the options on the board, and I know exactly the probabilities of each. So I know exactly how everything's going to go, and it's all terrible.
Yeah.
And, you know, and if you think that way, you're right often enough to justify it, but it's ultimately like a timid, it's a timid, safe way to live. It's like you're so afraid of disappointment that you're willing to spoil every single day of your life, because it's better to spoil it yourself than have it be ruined by forces outside your control. And, you know, perhaps reconnecting with the childlike wonder. You know, I have a 2.5-year-old right now, and I would say I have lost count of how many times I saw the movie Mary Poppins and Mary Poppins Returns this year. But both movies are about parents who've lost touch with their inner child.
Yes.
And they're unhappy with life. They're making their children unhappy. And Mary Poppins helps the children find their inner children, and it becomes contagious. It catches on with the parents, and the parents, you know, like the whole family functions better when they just get like that small perspective of like, oh, what it's like to be a child.
Yeah.
And this is often like my favorite sketch of all time from The Daily Show was, I think, in 2011 or 2012. You can look it up on YouTube. It's called Even Better Than a Real Thing. It was a John Oliver piece on nostalgia, and he was playing this compilation of Fox News hosts who kept saying, you know, when I was a child, this country was great. When I was a child, and it was, it was like Sean Hannity, who was a child in the 70s, and Bill O'Reilly was a child or Glenn Beck, who was a child in the 70s, Sean Hannity in the 60s, Bill O'Reilly in the 50s, and he would go back and talk to people from that decade. It was like, what was it like growing up in the most perfect decade in the history of the world? And they talked to people who were adults during those decades, and they were like, oh my gosh, the gas shortage, you know, women dying on tables from botched abortions, the racism, the Jim Crow. And he just kept going back, and he went back to like the 30s, and they were like, oh, like the Great Depression, you know, we all shared like one pack of bacon for a month or something like that. And it's like, what did all of these things have in common? And he plays all the clips back to back to back again. It's like, when I was a child, he's like, it's because you were effing children.
Yeah.
It's like, everything seems wonderful to you when you're a child. And I do think like he was using it as a, you know, kind of a takedown piece there. Because obviously these people were just out of touch. They're railing against the world not being like it was when they were children, because they have lost that perspective. But there's still a lot to enjoy in the world when you can take on that perspective. And I think of myself that way with like fan base stuff. I'm like, if I was a kid right now and they were releasing all these Star Wars shows, I would have no discernment, no taste. I would just be so full of joy that my world was building.
And I think that the difference between what we're seeing, what's being told here, and what's in that John Oliver piece is that that Daily Show piece is highlighting people who are saying they don't want things to be, they don't want to see the world as a child. They want the world to be like they thought it was as a child. Versus what's being shown here is like, look at where you are now.
Oh no, I'm not defending Fox News.
No. I'm
just to be clear.
Yeah. You know, I'm absolutely. No,
I would never.
I'm trying to clarify here, kind of for my own sake as well, is the idea of what Prince and Eckman-Lawn I think are showing is the idea of don't try to make things the way they were when you were a child. Remember how you felt as a child. So this is putting the onus on you, the person, versus on everyone else to change around you.
Right. Yes.
This
exactly.
It's his
saying
inner
you
child.
can transform this with your perspective.
You
can live in that world again without anything in the world changing. And that's a very powerful thing.
You can find joy in this by remembering what it was like to experience it, not by having the experience change into what you remember.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that is really powerful. There's a line here of you can get lost maybe in some potential self-delusion, you know?
Oh yeah.
So there's absolutely value in this idea of having what they mentioned, that the beginner's mind, the idea of at least being open to possibility. Because I agree with you 100%. Which I'm the same way. This idea of when you have so much information, you narrow it down to like, well, one of 4 things can happen and 3.5 of them are bad. You know, like that's just what it is.
I mean,
versus
that's inertia, right? That's gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's what the world does to you.
Yeah. Why not be open and allow for the experience and then decide what it is, even if it is on the negative side, you know? Why not be open to it because it hasn't happened yet? It actually, it kind of weirdly reminds me of this guy many years ago. Me and 2 of my buddies, we were out playing golf, and oftentimes if there's 3 of you and there's a single, you'll get paired with a random player. And so we got paired with this guy who, you know, just playing with us. And this is back when, the 3 of us were much worse than we are now at golf, which is saying something. But every shot we'd hit, like if it went way left or way right into the woods or whatever, the guy would basically be like, don't worry, it opens up over there. And we're like, really, dude? He said a couple of times, we joke. And then like I hit one like deep into the woods, and the guy was like, it opens up over there. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, no, it's like, that's someone's backyard. Like it's 30 feet, like it's not happening. And it was this idea of just like, yeah, well, you know, why worry about it now? Get up there and see what it looks like, you know?
Right.
His mindset was the next shot, but he had this positive mindset about golf, which is incredible on itself. But that was his thing of like, well, go look for it and see it, you know? But his mindset, it was, it opens up over there. If it's not, hey, all right, well, you know, make the shot that's there, but there's no reason to fret over it until you get up and take a look. And it was a fascinating thing that I think about to this day. This is like almost 15 years ago now when this happened. And me and my buddy still joke about it. You know, we'll still tell you, it opens up over there. You know, it's something we say at any time, and it makes us laugh. But I think about it, and I think like there's something admirable about that mindset, specifically in golf, because I cannot do that in golf. But maybe if I can do that in life a little bit more, it might be a little better, you know?
Okay, so yes, I agree with you with one small caveat, which is I think there's something very admirable about that perspective when someone like you or I earn it when we get there. But sometimes you meet an adult who seems like they have never experienced real life before, and theirs just comes from naivete. And my whole perspective came from reacting against that. And then it takes this whole journey for me to arrive back to a place of like, no, I can experience and enjoy good things. And someone likened it to, they said, you know, there's this hike in South America that there are 2 ways to get to this town. One of them is a train journey that goes through a mountain, and the alternative is to hike the mountain. And he said, you know, the hike, I think, takes, 2 days or something like that, and the train takes a couple hours. And he said, I went for the hike, and you can't even see this town until you're almost down the mountain, and you come down the mountain right where the train spits out. And these people on the train thought like, oh, this is such a gorgeous view in this little valley here. And they see this little town. He's like, they have a totally different experience than what we're having.
Yeah.
He's like, we trekked this mountain. We slept on top of it. We're hiking down and we see this beautiful little town here. And I'm like, I think that is the difference to me between the person who really, really gets it. Like, I get why life can seem so bleak, but I choose not to take that perspective anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, that's like, it's like a Barack Obama type person. Like, if you ever read like his memoir of his first 2 years in office.
I have not, you know.
Okay. There were times where he would talk publicly and you would think like, is this guy like really, really insulated and just never hears any criticism? Because people are pretty mad out here. No, he heard it all. He read letters written to him every day. He responded, to these letters every single day. Was meeting with anyone he could meet with. Heard all the criticism, and yet believed you could move forward. And there were enough good pieces in play that we can always be moving forward. And I think his like that's the title of his other book, The Audacity of Hope.
Of Hope, yes.
Yeah. I was like, the audacity of his hope really did inspire me, which, I'd love to hear more from that guy. I'd like to see him write another comic book. I don't know if you know that, but he was published as a writer in a comic book.
Yes. Yeah.
DC did that 80-page giant for Our Armed Forces or whatever it's called. It was like an old throwback title.
Yeah. But I think you illustrate the line there, that line of naivete,
Right.
In terms of that's where you're right. This idea of seeing the world through this endless possibility, that there has to be some tempering there. There has to be some tempering there. And I think that's where our character here has arrived, right? Because he's come through this experience of like, I felt nothing. And he's going to remember what it feels like to feel nothing, so that when he does find joy in something, it comes from that, of having been through that whole journey.
And so I think that's why
he's at the end of that journey there. Again, bringing back the theme of the book, he's come to the end of that. So there's probably in his mind a greater appreciation. Like, he buys all the candy at the end there, right? Because he can savor it now, because
and even the candy shop owner is like,
yeah,
I can't have that anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a comment on age there. So that's the comic shop, the candy shop owner with the expert mind, right? Narrow possibilities. The only possibilities there, I'm too old for this. The metabolism isn't there. He's only thinking about the consequence, the end. And yet this guy now, our character here, has gone through the ringer and he's made it to the end. And he's able to have that experience that's just a little bit greater now, because he knows where he came from. He knows how he got there.
Yeah. So to me, it felt like having an avatar, exist for me in a book.
Sure.
In the way that, like, even when I don't connect with the story that much, I almost always feel like a Jeff Lemire character, which is why Jeff Lemire is my favorite. Like, I'm just, I am a little sad and mopey in general, stuck in my own head, but still keep moving on and hope for better. And I think that's a Lemire character to a T.
No, that's a kind of base fundamental start for a lot of them. So.
Yeah, and I'm talking about his like slice of life books, not his horror books.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to number 6, which final issue, which I had as my favorite, you had as number 5 for you, and we kind of already talked a little bit as to why that was specifically made for each one of us. But to dive into this one, this is the issue drawn by Martin. I guess it's probably, I think it's Martin.
I think it's Martin.
It's Martin. Yeah. Morazzo, not Martin Morazzo, but longtime frequent collaborators you mentioned on the Ice Cream Man series. And issue 6 is the end of the sidewalk. And as we said, it is homage. I guess it's an homage. It's not a parody. It's an homage. I guess
It's
an
an
homage.
yeah, no, yeah.
It's an homage to Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends. But right away you get the invitation. I mean, like, it's almost like this is Ice Cream Man adjacent. This issue is Ice Cream Man adjacent. You know,
because the fact that it's like a little fourth Wall-E.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
Where like the narrator's talking to us about the character, but the character's also trying to speak to us through a video recorder. And I didn't like when we got the video camera and it broke the storytelling medium of the issue.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Like,
okay.
For me, if you had found a way to do that in the continuity of like the whole style of what we're doing, that would have been the next level masterpiece. It's still like, as a single issue comic, it is still a masterpiece. Like, I have this one. It was one that, like, I wasn't even following the series. I saw the cover and I was like, even if the cover doesn't have, even if the issue doesn't have anything to do with Where the Sidewalk Ends, I have to have that cover. And then I was delighted when I like flipped through it and I was like, this looks just like, I mean, like the way the words are arranged, which I'm wondering, you know, if that's artist letter or Martin or Prince, you know, saying like, well, I want it done this way, this way, this way.
This one feels like close collaboration with the letterer, because I'm sure I don't have Where the Sidewalk Ends in front of me right now, but in terms of the type of font, the location, the illustrations, all this, I'm sure.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I could see everything
there's enough,
except the dialogue being part of the art department, not necessarily letters.
For the poetry pages, I can definitely see this being like, you know, we're blocking off this space here, the text is going here, you're drawing on this side here, and knowing that they're going to be aping Silverstein style, which is interesting because having read a fair amount of Morazzo's work, like, there's a lot of Shel Silverstein in the way he draws the people anyway.
Oh yeah, I think there's also
the way he draws bodies. I think there's the way that Filipe Andrade draws bodies. You know, the way he draws figures with sometimes ganglion weird proportions. Like, that's such a Silverstein thing. You know, whether he's depicting horror or something scary or not, that's just kind of what he does. I can see a lot of that in some of the artists that are in this book.
Yeah, I was trying to think if there was an Ice Cream Man that has a Shel Silverstein cover, because I feel like this is not the first time it's alluded to that. But
I mean, Giving Tree, Light in the Attic, Missing Piece, Falling Up, I think some of the ones that I personally love, that I remember the most, and probably the most popular ones.
Yeah, and I think I had gotten it
library.
I had gotten it juggled in my head with Dr. Seuss.
Yeah,
who I was not as big a fan of, but iconic covers. But like issue 20 of Ice Cream Man had a whole bevy of Dr. Seuss covers.
Yeah, and
4 or 5.
Another kind of theme that would make sense here. Yeah, but yeah, I think for me, this is all about form and presentation. The fact that the fact that they went and did it this way, like, we're going to write it all. We're gonna tell the narrative story in this way, and Morazzo's going to make these drawings that are just Silverstein-esque, you know?
Yes.
And so the presentation of it and the attempt, the swing to say, we're going to do this, and I'm sure not knowing it was going to work. Right?
Oh, like, my gosh. Yeah.
Not being certain.
It's not just like, okay. So like, it's one of those things where you have to be so sure people know Shel Silverstein, because if you didn't happen to have parents who read Shel Silverstein to you and you picked up this issue,
that's crazy. You're right.
Right.
And
right.
Again, didn't cross my mind, because for me, and I think
our age.
Yeah. You know, again, handful younger than me, but people our age and a few years older, like Silverstein's work was ubiquitous. Again, the books I just named off there, The Giving Tree, Light in the Attic, The Missing Piece, Where the Sidewalk Ends. These were in every elementary school library classroom I had growing up, you know? And yeah, I guess the idea of like younger millennials, Gen Z kids, are they even reading Silverstein in schools anymore? God, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm like, I think those are the type of books that I wonder if the tablet kids ever read. Whereas, like, I know my daughter knows them.
But
like
also,
she can recite large portions of "I'm being eaten by a boa constrictor," which really isn't that much less dark than what goes on in this book.
Like, Silverstein's stuff is often very dark, and not like dark for children. Like some of his stuff is like dark. Some of his poetry and stories were really, really dark. But like his stuff also works really well on a tablet because a lot of it is just single page.
No, I just meant like the kids always playing games or like watching videos, like the ones who aren't reading.
That's true. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. When I think of the tablet kid, I think of the kid with the headphones at a restaurant who is like never has to engage with the family, never has to read a book.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump to, so you're right. So we got through X amount of pages and then the camcorder shows up and then we get one, two, three. We get 4 pages of our quote unquote protagonist filming himself, basically saying like, I was given this book, like he's reading this book. And it's saying all these things are happening to his family. Are they happening? What's going on? So it's like he's the one experiencing the meta story. And then it jumps back in and like the next poem, I do love that. The next poem is ignore that, please. And it's a poem about like, basically like those responsible have been sacked, that didn't happen. And then it continues, up until we get to the terminal rule. And then the book ends in a more traditional comic format, where we get the like literal sidewalk ending there. Right.
Right. And so I think my thing was like the whole camcorder bit was a deconstruction of the Shel Silverstein thing and then the return to it. And I'm like, I would have loved the pure
if it went all the way through
without having to like, but here's our spin on it. It's like, no, your spin on it is that you're doing it and you're doing the heck out of it. Like, and my mom would always read these to me in like a very sing-songy, she would pick up whatever the rhyme pattern is. And so I was doing that and I was doing it out loud. Like the first time I tried to read this quietly, it didn't work for me.
This one's tough. You have to read it in a meter.
Right.
Whether in your head or out loud, I'm with you. Because it is poetry. So, okay, so what do you feel about the ending jumping out of the poetry construct and going into, so again, there is the terminal rule. We have whoops, where our character has taken his life, but then the last poem is the best day. This idea of we flash back to a good moment in this person's life prior to things maybe taking a turn. And then it jumps to the end where we see his daughter now has reached the end of the sidewalk. And it's still pretty sparse, but it's still, it's presented like a more traditional sequential art comic. How do you feel about the format changing at that point? Because it's the end. Are you more okay with that? Because like
I'm more okay with it, but I would have thought there would have been something just like so ridiculously artistic about never breaking the act. Never breaking. And I think there's just not enough pages in an issue. Because like when they cut to that or the camcorder thing, they covered so much more exposition than the poems could have. It would have had to be an oversized issue if they wanted to do all of it.
So what I'll say is this. What if this were issue 3 in the middle? There, they probably could have committed to the bit and just did the whole thing that way. But because this is the final issue, that the final 3 pages there of his daughter on the phone, smoking the cig and looking at the end of the sidewalk, like that's the thesis of the whole book, right? The fact that we know things will end actually presents each of us with an amazing choice. What will you do with the limited time you get on the spinning rock? The clock is ticking, the end is nigh. So what would you do? Like that's what the
But
thesis is.
just
So
look at that
me,
book or look at that page
yeah.
and remove her caption bubbles. And I think the black text on white background works as like a continuation of the poem, and you just have the page art with the poem like every other page in the book. I don't need her phone call bit. Like, I think it was just slightly overdone there. Because the very last page or the last 2 pages, I feel
She
like
is wordless.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It
I'm
is
like,
just
I just
narration.
don't know what her saying. I'm dead serious. I was strolling along in the sidewalk. I wonder how far down it goes. I can't explain it with words, man. You're just gonna have to get over here and see it for yourself. Which I like that it's the little precursor. It's like a prequel to Shel Silverstein's book where there's multiple kids looking over the edge.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but I didn't need that dialogue. In fact, I thought it kind of junked it up. It's pretty nitpicky.
That
Like,
is, but
It's a
I think
4.5 out of 5-star issue for me.
that I think is fair. I think that's fair. It doesn't bother me, but I can understand. I can understand what the intent would have been had there been no words. Had it been wordless and it had just been her on the phone, walking down, stopping at the end, looking over, and doing all of that, and then cutting to lighting the cigarette, looking at it, thinking about it, throwing it over, turning around and walking back. It's like looking into the void, accepting the void is there, and still choosing to go and live on and move forward.
Yeah.
Continuing on, getting the thesis of the whole book here. Everything ends somewhere. Even the sidewalk. So what do you do between your time of starting, your time of ending? And that's obviously it's literalized here, it's shown on the page. But I think because it is the final story, it has to feel like the wrap up, which is why you have this coda at the end. And maybe you could have had this coda at the end. I mean, you couldn't have, this whole sidewalk thing. But I guess what I am saying is, had this been an interior issue about sidewalk, about you think that thing,
I agree.
they could have maybe committed more to the poetry bit, and it could have been the whole thing without explanation, and the whole story been done that way. You wouldn't have had felt the need to have a
That's true. I think
good
I
feeling
just wanted
conclusion. Yeah.
like the most artsy pinky in the air version of this, which would have been that regardless of sequence.
Sure.
And I had the feeling like very satisfying ending, but if he ever decided to do another 6 Swan Songs, I would absolutely read those. What I was really thinking is the ultimate spinoff would be if you just did 6 key moments broken down 1 issue each for Cincinnati sports teams, the Swan Songs of what would be championship seasons.
We got way more than 6, man. It's tough.
I know. Well, you got 3 Super Bowls minimum. I think you've got Kenyon Martin's leg injury as 1 issue. Probably the Reds 2012. They weren't going to win the World Series, but
2012 Game 5 was bad.
To lead the series 2-0 and
wild
drop
game
4 straight.
Wild card game 1999. There are plenty of bad ones. There are plenty of bad ones. But I mean,
so
this is an idea.
But we could break down the end of things into an important moment.
Yeah.
And I think Cincinnatians are distinctly good at that.
But this is an idea he can come back to, just like his other anthology, the Sad Clown Stories. Like, he did 6 issues and you stop. He did another one. Ice Cream Man shows that anthologies can be ongoing in this way. And W. Maxwell Prince has shown specifically that if his name is attached to it or when his name is attached to it, people are going to buy anthologies. Because one of the big things you hear from retailers is that no one buys them. Anthologies don't sell. except for Ice Cream Man. So it's like he's the exception that proves the rule. So if there was a Swan Songs Volume 2, a Haha Volume 2, and yeah, he's going to find 6 incredible new artists, or I guess it'd be 5 artists, and Morazzo probably does number 6 again because he did it with Haha, which
Right.
is totally fine. He did it here. Yeah, if he has more stories to tell, this could absolutely be an ongoing anthology. Because yeah, everything ends, you know? Everything comes to an end some point. Everything dies in some way, whatever death ends up meaning. And I think this is a cool exploration. And I think the thing that I love about it is it really is a showcase for these artists. It
Oh my
allowed them to
gosh.
really,
Yeah.
it allows them to do some really, really cool stuff. With a writer who's just got some wild ideas, whether or not they all totally work for every reader. Yeah, your mileage varies on every book, but yeah, I would love it if they went back, if he had 6 more stories and found a bunch of new artists and let them just like really really flourish. So yeah, I think this is a neat exploration, a cool exploration of this idea. Because again, we think about death and we really only think about human life, right? The ending of a human life. And
Right.
and to think about death as just ending and looking at it from all these different perspectives that Swan Song gives us. I think it was a good way to start. I like that we started with this. So we have these ideas in our mind as we move forward to look at our other books that are a little more traditional when we think about what death is,
Yeah. And speaking of which, next week we get into Many Deaths of Layla Starr. Totally different vantage point on it. I think in some ways equally creative storytelling. I mean, I have never encountered a single issue of a comic told from the perspective of a cigarette before.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
There are definitely swings in Layla Starr, 100%. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe something we can think about when you're covering an idea as abstract as death. It allows you to take some big swings,
yeah,
because
well, I mean, whether it allows it or encourages it or whatever it does, it
yeah,
seems to
maybe it
draw it
does
out of
encourage it. Yeah.
people. Because because it's the one thing that no matter how much time any of us spend on it, we all have the same amount of data about
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
exactly
like,
right. That's what I was just thinking when you said it, that maybe it encourages that kind of thought, because what else do you have? How many perspectives can you tell? How many thoughts can you have on it? You're right. There are unlimited number of ways we can think about it, but the one way none of us can is from the perspective, from the idea that itself. So yeah, no, there are some really big swings, and so I think there is some. You're right. There's a creative connection between these books, even though storytelling is entirely different, premise is entirely different, but it's like the storytelling energy, the vibe of how we want to approach this story and make the reader think about things differently and make the reader look at it differently. That's where these are really akin.
yeah, yeah. And this being both of these being extremely different from week 3. So,
Yes, yes, yeah.
I think we have curated a better list than we thought we did. Like, I think we thought it was pretty good, and it's going to end up being great.
I think discussion wise, it's going to end up being. We had this, little pre-recording discussions you and I have. I think we had a discussion about what order we wanted to take these things in, and I think what we have here is going to really work from a storytelling standpoint. But I was really excited to dive into, like, really get into Swan Songs. I read it as it came out, but I hadn't reread it since. I hadn't even gone back through any of the issues before, even though again, because they're unique and because they're so cool, like issue 5, you can just flip through it and just be mesmerized by those collages. Again, I can flip through issue 3, Filipe Andrade's issue, the issue that you and I both, ranked as our least favorite, because I love the way he colors these panels. I love the contrast. So there's so much I can go back and look at, but I hadn't done it. I think because this book's very recent, just finished up last year. So, what's 2025 now? Technically, it finished up very recently within the last year or so. So I hadn't really had time to go back and look at it, but examining it now for the show with you, Mike, was really, really rewarding. And I think this specific perspective, like, let's take a look at how death is used and ending is used and how it's presented to the reader and what that makes the reader feel like and how they connect with it. I think it's giving those multiple options for our first discussion, I think, was the right choice. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great proof of concept that we need to do more anthologies on the podcast.
I think so. I love an anthology, and again, I think I have people ask what my favorite comics are, and Sandman is always number 1, Criminal is always number 2, and number 3 and 4 are Astro City and Fables. And now, while those are stories with anthology aspects to them, in that there may be an ongoing narrative, but it's not told sequentially. You're getting the story of an entire area, city of people or whatnot in kind of anthology chunks. But a book like Swan Songs, where it's individual issues that are different, I think can be really great fodder.
Well, and it's one of those, every once in a while in an anthology series, you'll have a miss, and you don't feel the need to be like, maybe I'll bail on this book because it was just one issue. Whereas like when you're reading a sequential story and it's a 12-issue miniseries or an ongoing series and you read 2 bad issues in a row, you're like,
it's just not going where I want. Yeah, it's just not going. It's just not going where I like, where I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah, an anthology. Yeah, there's a reset. And if it were one like this, where multiple artists, different creators come in, single writer with the theme, and then just all these different ideas and different approaches coming in, you can get some really, really special stuff. And I think Swan Songs is a book that, again, it's a book about death. It's evergreen. You can always pick it up. It's never going to feel dated. You're going to look at it and you're going to find something that's cool in it. Each of these stories, there's a good chance one of these 6 hit you in a way, Yeah,
I mean,
one of these 6 is going to
hit you. I don't know if
you might already be dead. I'm sorry. You might already be dead, but one of these is going to hit you, and you're going to connect with a little more than the other ones. And what that says about you is up to you. It can mean nothing at all. But when you have this kind of spread shot look at a theme, you said something about one of these is gonna find the reader, and gonna make you hopefully examine the way you think about the world, the way you think about life and living, which then, has an impact on how you think about how it ends. And I think that was the goal of the book, and kind of think what we want to try to dig into as we get into our next 3 discussions, which are a little more traditional in terms of their one narrative in terms of what's being presented around the idea of death versus kind of 6 different ones. But we want to take that same mindset.
Yes.
Take that same idea into these other narrative stories and try to keep that. In this case, we'll go back to issue 5, to the Eckman-Lawn issue. Want to keep that beginner's mind, keep that idea of multiple possibilities, and don't go into these stories with that narrow expert mind view. If we can do that, I think the discussions will be real fruitful.
Yeah. And by the way, that was a new concept to me. To my shame, I know very, very little about Buddhism. I have a few friends that practice, but
I'm with you.
Like, you could have described the concept of this to me and said, this is part of a major world religion, and I would have guessed Buddhism, based on the practice.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't know this specifically either, but the idea you hear, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Child's mind is clear, is open. So the fact that it was a specific Buddhist thing presented that way here, I didn't know that either. But I like that idea as kind of a mantra for our approach to this story, to our discussions here. Try to keep it open mind and let these ideas, the different viewpoints and perspectives come in and see how it affects you as we broach this topic of death and dying and ending.
Yes. All right. Well, everything has to end, including this episode.
Yep.
And I think it's been a long one, and this is not par for the course for this series, but the anthology nature of this one, I think, just takes longer. It is what it is. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
And we will thank you for listening, and we will see you next week for the many depths of art.
Yeah. Peace.